Welcome back to the Play-by-Play Podcast YouTube channel, where today we are returning back to the corner, the segment of the podcast where we talk about all news within the combat sports world. And today we have a banger, no pun intended, because wow, we just witnessed probably one of the most entertaining fights that I've seen probably over the last, 4 to 5 years between Deontay Wilder and Derek Chisora. It was a fight that was marked to be Derek Chisora's 50th and final fight in boxing. And there was obviously a lot of big-time questions around both of these fighters, especially Wilder coming off of still some massive layoffs, a fight against, an American fighter that wasn't even ranked within the top 100 and still looking poor. There are questions to say of, can he revive himself one more time, put himself back into the picture with some of the bigger names? Can he still be a draw? Yada, yada, yada. And man, so many of those questions were answered tonight by both Deontay Wilder and Derek Chisora. They put on one heck of an event. Shout out to Misfits Pro Boxing. I believe that this is only their second event. And they started out with a banger. I was a little bit worried when this fight was first announced, just because two older guys. Yes, they're both front foot aggressive, powerful fighters, but sometimes that could look a little bit messy. And we did have some messy points within this fight. There were a little bit of wrestling matches, some pushes. Derek Chisora getting scrambled into the ropes, and Wilder, swinging elbows at him and whatnot. So the night as a whole wasn't pretty, but as far as entertainment value goes, we definitely got our money's worth here. But let's quit being broad with this. Let's go ahead and take a look at the fight itself, because like I mentioned, Deontay Wilder surprised the heck out of me, especially in those first 3 rounds coming out. I was very skeptical to see what he would potentially look like, especially going up against Derek Chisora, who is more or less just a bulldozer, especially at this point in his career. Loves to just put his head down, walk forward, and just overwhelm you with a different variety of big-time looping power shots. And with Wilder being one of the thinner, smaller heavyweights within his era, I was really, really skeptical as to how he would be able to, handle the overbearing weight of Chisora coming over, the power, and continuously being able to box on the back foot, because that has been probably one of the biggest weaknesses within his career, especially within those second and third Fury fights, which Fury forced him to do and ended up exposing a big-time weakness. But overall, Wilder actually didn't look out of it at all to begin. In fact, I thought that he started pretty well and very quick. He looked a little bit more on his toes. Sure, he was still flat-footed at points and still a little bit slow, and maybe going up against a younger, more energetic fighter, he would have been taken advantage more of. But going up against somebody like Derek Chisora, he still was able to circle relatively well. He was still picking his jab pretty solid, and Chisora, with little to no head movement, was a pretty easy target to go out and jab the head off on. He was able to hit some pretty solid right hands to the body, still loading up on that right hand a little bit too much, but was still able to make partial contact within that right hand and put together some combinations. It was impressive. And for Chisora, I was a little bit concerned that, maybe this was just too little too late for him at this point in his career, because I wasn't really understanding what his game plan was. Because yes, he was coming forward, he was putting the pressure on, and he was trying to push Wilder to the ropes, but he wasn't necessarily throwing, a ton of punches. Not that he wasn't posing himself as any type of threat to Wilder, and Wilder's defense didn't really have to be very closed up, because there weren't just a lot of shots really coming to him. But then all that began to slowly change around round 4. Round 4, round 5, and round 6 were all pretty solid rounds for Derek Chisora. He was finally able to, ramp up his activity. He was able to land those looping shots like we were talking about. And Wilder, have to give him credit, was taking those shots very, very well, especially at his older age of 40 years old, but was getting into some trouble within the pocket, getting into these exchanges. And if you've watched Deontay Wilder over his career, accuracy has never really been his strong point either. Like I said, he loads up a lot on the big-time right hand. He doesn't do a ton to really set it up. And so it's very, very easy at times to be able to cover up and to keep it from landing. The point is when he can land that one big shot is when it's dangerous. But overall, that doesn't happen very often. And he was having some issues within that 4th and 5th round with, holding his hands back, not being able to land a lot, Chisora landing some big time open shots. And, it was starting to look a little bit difficult for Wilder in there. He looked a little bit tired. He looked like he was taking a little bit of a break, and he was just trying to assess what he could realistically do with that pressure from Chisora. And at that point, I thought that Chisora would just start rolling off of that, and that fight would be completely taken over by just the pressure and aggression of Chisora. But again, credit to Wilder. He stayed within the pocket. He stayed in the fight. He did a very, very great job at staying behind his jab. He wasn't afraid to exchange with Chisora at all, which allowed him to have a lot of big-time shots, which I believe in the 8th round, is what led to the knockdown that he had on Chisora. He was roughing him up. He wasn't scared to get physical with him, which is what we have seen him lack in the past, especially the past couple of fights against guys like Joseph Parker and Zhilei Zhang, and even the American fighter that he went up and fought against. He looked a little bit more like his older self, and he was actually able to, take a little bit more control on the back half of the fight as Chisora was, beginning to tire and beginning to take some big-time shots. Wilder was able to step on that gas and just be a bigger threat than Chisora at the end of the day. His right hand was probably the biggest threat of the night, and Chisora, unfortunately, he had to respect that, and it limited his ability to really throw a big-time amount of punches because he had to cover up, and he couldn't take a big-time amount unless he wanted to get stopped. And so while they're showing that, more up-tempo type of activity and whatnot, it was impressive to see, especially for somebody at 40 years old. And, credit to him. He ends up coming away with the decision. Shout out to Derek Chisora, by the way. He is an absolute boxing legend, has faced the who's who of the heavyweight division. Just off of my head, Dillian White, Tyson Fury, Alexander Usyk, Joe Joyce. I believe he fought Kubrat Pulev 2 times. Just the who's who of the heavyweight division. Go ahead and look at his resume. He's a British legend. He just all around is just a warlock, a really, really great big-time come-forward fighter. And it's really, really sad to see him having to walk away, especially off of a loss, just because he has been through so many wars and has made so many entertaining fights throughout his career. So shout out to him, and I hope that he enjoys his retirement. But moving on to Wilder, he made it very clear that he is not done, that he still wants to go forward, that he wants to try to get himself back into the world title picture. And in my opinion, that is going to be very unlikely. I know that there were negotiations earlier on with Alexander Usyk's team. To me, that's not a direction that he should realistically go. I think that he would get crushed within that, and especially going up against some of these younger guys like Kabayel, Moses Itama and whatnot. I really just don't think that that is a safe route for him to go, because I just don't think that any of those fights are going to be competitive. All those guys are much faster. Their frames are more filled out. They're stronger punchers. They would just cause him a lot of real difficulty with the looks that they would give, especially Moses Itama with his speed. They're just too young for him at this point in his career. So the question is where do you move him, and where could he really go from here? And in my opinion, I think that he has now solidified himself, especially with a massive entertaining fight that he had today, as another big-time pay-per-view draw name. And for me, now could be the time to potentially go out and make kind of a legend tour out of Deontay Wilder, to kind of turn back the clock and have him face off against some of the other names within his era that he never got to fight against. Andy Ruiz is one that immediately comes to mind. Now, again, is that a difficult fight for Wilder? You could say so, because Ruiz does present, some very much respected hand speed and whatnot, but Ruiz also hasn't been very active. We haven't seen him since the Jarrell Miller fight, which was on the undercard of Terence Crawford versus Idril Madrimov and whatnot. He is coming off of a big-time broken hand injury, and he himself, he needs a revival. He needs a big name next to him and a big-time win that people can begin to take him seriously if he wants to start pushing towards a world title push once again within his career. So I think that's another one that, number one, it's a very, very interesting clash of styles. It's two massive, massive names from kind of this late 2010s heavyweight era that we're bringing to. It's a fight that people have wanted for a couple of years now, that has been teased. And I know that both teams have been in talks, once or twice to potentially go through with it, but it's never happened. Overall, that's just an interesting matchup, and two very, very big names from that previous era. And then the second one that I really look at, and I think is pretty obvious, especially with him being in attendance tonight, is Anthony Joshua. It's the AJ fight. And obviously, we have been clamoring for that fight for about the past 6 to 8 years when these two were at the top of their games in the heavyweight division. Pure boxer just against, pure power, a pure brawler with AJ and Deontay Wilder. And there were, some moments tonight where they exchanged some glares or even some lack of glares when Wilder was coming away into the first entering the arena. AJ was in the hallway. He did not bat him an eye. We know that this is a fight that has been tried to be set up for a while. And now with AJ coming off of his win against Jake Paul, off of a massive card on Netflix, with AJ being in the direction of potentially facing off against Tyson Fury, with Wilder now coming off of this win against Chisora, now could be the perfect time. Now that they're not clearly both at that world championship level, now that they're both very much older in age and have maybe lost a step or two, they're still likely at an even playing field here and would still be a realistic, entertaining matchup to bring in. The build-up to it would be fantastic. There would be such massive history and storylines there. Ultimately, I think that AJ would win that just purely based off of his ability to box. But again, you never know. Wilder with that power could pull anything out. And I actually think that that could be possibly a good warm-up fight for AJ for the Fury fight. It would make him a heck ton of money, would put on a massive event. And that's a fight that I think that AJ could realistically win. He could get some solid rounds in. And then you push the Fury fight at the end of 2026. That would be a massive, massive year for Anthony Joshua. And then if you're Deontay Wilder and you do manage to pull off the impossible and you do manage to go ahead and knock AJ out, then I do think that there is, a realistic pathway for you to put him in there with Fabio Wardley or Moses Itama or a G. Caballel or maybe even Alexander Usyk if he wants to do a little bit more of a Legends fight. And you can kind of begin to work out who was the best fighter out of that previous area. Obviously, we know that Usyk is number one out of all of those guys. But then Fury, Wilder, Joshua, those guys are kind of, up in the air in terms of ranking because Wilder and AJ never faced each other. Fury and AJ have never faced each other. We still have a lot of massive questions between those big three because we still haven't seen majority of those big-time matchups. So for me, for Wilder, instead of having him go out and attacking and potentially get destroyed in a future title fight, have him against AJ, put him up against Ruiz. Heck, put him up against, who knows, maybe Dillian White. Maybe now make him as like the British, retiree type guy, retiring Dillian White or something like that. Just give a matchup with a bigger name that's realistic for Wilder to win. Don't push him too hard because at this point in his career, he has clearly lost a step. And while he looked great tonight, there definitely was a step behind in competition. Derek Chisora, as amazing as he is, he's not Joseph Parker. He's not even Zhilei Zhang at this point. So Wilder, good win for him. Great to see it, especially with, so much of the ups and downs that he's gone through his career, especially personally, a lot of the controversies that he's been in, personally with his family and his wife and whatnot, which a lot of those things that I completely do not agree with. But to see him back and being able to win this fight, you could see how much it meant to him. You could see his fire and his passion and his love pretty much back. There were a couple of times where he was laughing, sticking his tongue out, going crazy. You could see that he was enjoying being in the fire. It's really, really great to see. And I just hope that Misfits Pro or whoever's going to be promoting him going forward does this right, because there's a right way to go about this, and then there's a way that could potentially damage him both physically and legacy-wise at the tail end of his career, and I just do not think that we have to see that. But overall, let me know what you think down below in the comments. What were your thoughts about this fight? What are your thoughts on Derek Chisora's career? What are your thoughts on Deontay Wilder potentially going forward? Maybe a matchup with Ruiz or AJ, or maybe even, who knows, Alexander Usyk of that matter. Let me know about that all down below within the comment section, as well as subscribing to the channel, leaving a like, and sharing it with your friends. And if you haven't already, go ahead and follow us on all social medias, that being TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those ads are going to be down below. We're on all of those social medias. You will get to see my latest reactions to breaking news within the NBA, the NFL, and combat sports. And you will also never forget for whenever the podcast decides to upload an episode. And without further ado, guys, that's all that I have for you guys today. I will see you guys on the next one. Hope you guys have a great rest of your weekend. Happy Easter, and God bless. Peace.